Can I ask you a question? A Miraculous Ladybug Love Sqaure Fanfiction, Part 3. Can I ask you a question? Sqaure asked. It wasn't a common question for him to ask. He could count the times down on one hand with still 2 other claws up. However, even with the rarity of the sentence, it felt way too repetitive. It's not like he'd ever asked Marichat such a question. He'd asked Ladybug, yes, but not Marichat. Yeah, shoot, she said lazily, motioning with her arms. The Asian girl was lying perpendicular to her bed's headboard. She was on her phone, looking at dresses, while he just stared into space. More like random things in her room, while his head flew up to the clouds. Is it possible to get over your first love? He asked. Sqaure wanted to say that he was asking because of the breakup with Kagami a month ago. He wanted to say that he was trying to get over the Japanese fencing prodigy, but if he did, that would be lying. He was weirdly stuck still on Ladybug. She was his first love, and even though the flame had been moved to the back, it was still there. Kagami, he just maybe didn't love her. Not in the same way he loved Ladybug. He wanted to get over it. He really thought he was, actually. It was after he and Kagami split that he realized that the superheroine still held his heart. And considering how life was going, the heroine and her dismissal of a relationship, and the fact that he was getting older and really should be moving on, well, it was high time to finally figure out how to do the latter. What? Marichat said, no doubt choked. She lifted her head, and that was when Sqaure noticed the pink on her face. Do you think you can get over your first love? I mean, they say you never forget your first love, Sqaure explained more thoroughly. Marichat gave him a melancholy smile and sighed. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, she said, seeming far, far away. Really? He asked. Marichat nodded, now sitting upright. Of course. They're the first person you love. That's special and hard to beat, she said, as if it was common knowledge. Though it probably was. But in his defense, growing up as the Adrian Agress, he never really heard the common stuff. So you think you can't get over your first love? What about the people who marry someone else? Sqaure said. Marichat shook her head. Okay, clearly he misunderstood what she meant. Okay, let me explain what I think a first love is, and then it might make more sense as to why I think you can move on from your first love while just not completely getting over it. Because clearly you have been sheltered, Marichat said, with a more characteristically giggle as she threw a pillow at his face. The serious, sad, and faraway wistful looks on her didn't work with a face with such a bright smile. Sqaure urged her to explain with his eyes, and so she did. Your first love, they're so special. They hold a certain place in your heart. You can never love anyone else the same way. They're the only person you love who you will ever love with your entire heart. Every bit of it. You'll always love them in a way, with just a piece of your heart. That's why I think you can't ever stop loving them or completely get over them. But you can move on. It will take time and acceptance of the situation, but it will happen. How many people do you know are still married to their first love? Not many, huh? So they end up becoming part of your past. A special sacred part, yes, but the past nonetheless. First loves aren't really meant to last forever. First relationships aren't always meant to last forever. They become something else, part of your past. Does that make sense? Marichat explained. Well, she had certainly put thought into that explanation. She was probably right. Really, do people actually marry their first girlfriend or boyfriend or significant others? Yeah, it does, Chat Noir said. Marionette sat up and sighed. The boy by her completely understood and felt that notion. He'd get over Ladybug. Eventually. You sound so bittersweet, Chat said with a slight jab to her side to lighten the mood. The black-haired girl laughed, though it sounded hollow. Yeah, comes from experience, she said, looking away from him. The superhero clad in black tilted his head to the side. Marionette didn't necessarily see his action, but she seemed to sense it. I'm still trying to, get over my first love. I think I'm mostly over it. It feels ridiculous, though. It's been quite a while. I'm learning to live with it, knowing I love someone and they won't ever love me back. Sometimes it hurts like sharp knives. But other days it doesn't feel much more than just a dull throbbing. But I'm getting over it and accepting it, so it's all good. Marionette threw her head up, almost about to laugh, but she didn't. The blonde next to her stayed quiet. He understood how she felt, almost exactly. Maybe he wasn't at that point where she was, the whole getting used to heartbreak, but he was hopefully getting close. It's not like the small jokes and flirts had gone away. The urges to try and charm the beloved red superhero of Paris were very much still there. But now it was more of a habit to control, and they slipped out less and less. Ladybug didn't seem bothered by it at this point. In the beginning, she was confused by the sudden lack of flirtatious one-liners, but now they'd melted into a whole new dynamic. One that involved much less romance than he had once hoped for. Marionette was going to be right. Ladybug was just going to melt away and become part of his past. He'd move on and have a relationship with someone else. Perhaps he'll know her real name. Maybe there would be a time where he'd look back and laugh at the sheer audacity he had in his youth. Maybe if they met up, he could joke and smile at the silly little and old love. The lady would always own a piece of his heart. He could never love someone else more, and that was that. Chat Noir looked at a blanket hanging haphazardly off the side of the bed for no particular reason. Strangely, though, he felt it was telling him something. It was hanging off the bed, being pulled by gravity, yet it clung to a fight that eventually it would lose. Like hanging on to someone. Eventually reality will kick back in and pull you in a completely different place, the one you should be in rather than an unreal dream. Goodness, when did he, of all people, become so philosophical? You never did say what you think a first love becomes. Chat Noir flipped the two pigtails tied in Marionette's hair. She pushed his hands away with a giggle. I think they become an exception. The one person you let get away with anything. Chat Noir's face contracted into a skeptical expression, and Marionette clearly noticed because she rolled her eyes with a smile as if there was an obvious answer. Tell me, if your first love was to ask you to date them right now, what would you say? Chat Noir thought for a second. Not because he needed it. The first thing that popped into his mind was a giant yes. It was more to process it. I'm sure you'll say yes. See? They are an exception. Whatever rule you have, they can probably get away with breaking it. Oh, I'd never go back to an ex, except blank. I'd never date a redhead, except blank. I'd never go skydiving unless blank takes me. You'll drop everything for them, and sometimes whether you like it or not. Marionette looked at her hands sadly. First loves? aren't your forevers. They aren't meant to be. You're not going to grow old with them. That's what I believe. They're the what-ifs that run through your mind. If someone asked me to go bungee jumping, I'd say no way. But if, keyword if, my first love was to ask me, I'd go. I'd go for him, because he's my what if this happened. He's my exception for every rule. That's what I believe first love is, what it becomes, an exception of what if this happened. It's kind of sad. Every fairy tale makes you think that your first love is this is it, end all be all, but that's just not the truth. It's not supposed to last. It's not supposed to last forever. It's just a person that you wish you could have worked with. Chat Noir didn't say anything. He was far too stunned by the sheer deepness of Marichat's words and the amount it pierced his soul. Wow, that's rather foreboding, Chat Noir said after a couple minutes of silence. Marichat nodded with the smallest of smiles. Do you want to do something a little less sad and depressing than talking about people who will never love us? Marichat asked, and Chat Noir nodded immediately. Mecha Strike? Yes!